Imagine a place where death has been outlawed, where no matter how old you become, no matter how sick you are forbidden from dying. This isn't science fiction. This isn't some dystopian fantasy. This is real. And it exists right now on a remote Norwegian archipelago in the Arctic Circle. Welcome to Longyearbyen, Svalbard, the town where it's illegal to die. For over 80 years, residents of this frozen settlement have lived under one of the world's strangest laws. If you're terminally ill, you're sent away. If you're too old and frail, you cannot stay. And if you die here, your body cannot be buried in the frozen ground. But why? What sinister secret lies beneath the permafrost? And what does this bizarre regulation tell us about humanity's relationship with death itself? Today, we're traveling to the edge of the world to uncover the truth about the place where no one dies. Longyearbyen is not your typical town. Located on the Svalbard archipelago, it sits at 78 degrees north latitude, just 800 miles from the North Pole. With a population of approximately 2,300 people, it's one of the world's northernmost permanent settlements, existing in a realm of extremes where polar bears outnumber humans, and the sun disappears entirely for 4 months each year. This remote community was established in 1906 as a coal mining settlement by American businessman John Monroe Longyear. Today, it's transformed into a unique hub for Arctic research, tourism, and education. Scientists from around the world flock here to study climate change, glaciology, and Arctic ecosystems. The town boasts the global seed vault, humanity's backup plan for agricultural catastrophe, buried deep in the mountainside. But despite its modern research facilities, hotels, restaurants, and even a university campus, Longyearbyen operates under rules unlike anywhere else on Earth. And the most famous of these rules is simple, stark, and seemingly impossible to enforce. You cannot die here. The question everyone asks is, how do you stop death? The answer is darker and more practical than you might imagine. Let's be clear about something from the start. The law doesn't actually say dying is illegal in Longyearbyen. That would be absurd, even by bureaucratic standards. You can't criminalize death itself. What the regulation actually addresses is burial. Since 1950, it has been forbidden to bury bodies in Longyearbyen Cemetery. The graveyard still exists. You can visit it today, filled with weathered wooden crosses and stone markers, but no new burials have been added in over 7 decades. The cemetery has been effectively closed, frozen in time like everything else in this Arctic outpost. So why would authorities ban burials in a town cemetery? The answer lies deep in the permafrost. Svalbard's ground is permanently frozen. Permafrost extends hundreds of meters below the surface, creating a natural deep freeze that never thaws. In most places, this would seem ideal for preserving a cemetery. After all, cold preserves things, right? But in Longyearbyen, scientists made a disturbing discovery in the 1950s. Bodies weren't decomposing. They weren't returning to dust as they would in warmer climates. Instead, they were being preserved, frozen in time, maintained in their state at the moment of burial. The permafrost had transformed the cemetery into something more like a morgue, a collection of perfectly preserved corpses lying beneath the surface. But preservation alone wouldn't be enough to ban burials. The real problem was what the preservation meant for disease. In 1998, scientists traveled to Longyearbyen with a mission that sounds like something from a horror film. They were searching for bodies from the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic, and they found them. The Spanish flu was one of humanity's deadliest pandemics, killing an estimated 50 to 100 million people worldwide between 1918 and 1920. It struck Longyearbyen particularly hard. In a matter of weeks, the virus tore through the small mining community, killing 7 young miners. These men were buried in the cemetery, laid to rest in the frozen ground, and forgotten by history. Until scientists came looking for them. When researchers exhumed tissue samples from these victims, they made a chilling discovery. The Spanish flu virus was still present, not fragments, not traces, but viable genetic material, preserved perfectly by the permafrost for 8 decades. The virus that had killed millions was still there, frozen in time, waiting in the Arctic soil. This discovery sent shockwaves through the scientific and public health communities. If a deadly virus could survive for nearly a century in Svalbard's permafrost, what else might be lurking there? What other pathogens, bacteria, or diseases might be preserved in the frozen dead? The concern wasn't just theoretical. Climate change is warming the Arctic twice as fast as the rest of the planet. Permafrost that has been frozen for millennia is beginning to thaw. Scientists worry that as this thawing continues, ancient pathogens, ones humanity may have no immunity to, could be released. In Siberia, anthrax outbreaks have already occurred when thawing permafrost exposed infected reindeer carcasses from decades past. In 2016, a 12-year-old boy died after an anthrax outbreak linked to a 75-year-old reindeer carcass that had thawed during an unusually warm summer. Suddenly, Longyearbyen's burial ban made perfect sense. The town wasn't trying to defy death itself. It was trying to prevent the dead from becoming a public health crisis. So what actually happens when someone dies in Longyearbyen? After all, despite the regulations, death does occasionally visit this remote corner of the world. When someone passes away in Longyearbyen, whether from natural causes, accident, or illness, their body is not buried locally. Instead, the deceased is transported to the mainland. Most commonly, bodies are flown to Tromsø, a city in northern Norway about 400 kilometers to the south, where they can be properly buried or cremated according to family wishes and Norwegian law. This creates a unique psychological reality for Longyearbyen's residents. Everyone who lives here knows that this is not where their story will end. You can live in Longyearbyen, work there, raise children there, build a life there, but you cannot die there. Or more accurately, you cannot remain there after death. But the regulations extend beyond just what happens after death. They also dictate who can live in Longyearbyen in the first place. The town has an unspoken but firmly enforced policy. If you are terminally ill, you cannot stay. If you are elderly and require significant medical care, you are expected to relocate to mainland Norway. The local hospital is small and equipped only for basic medical care and stabilization. There is no hospice care, no facilities for long-term elderly care, and no support for end-of-life medical needs. This policy creates a population with unusual demographics. Longyearbyen has very few elderly residents, and virtually no one dies of old age there. The average age is remarkably young. Most residents are working-age adults. Children are born in Longyearbyen, but when pregnant women are approaching their due date, they're typically sent to the mainland to give birth in better-equipped facilities. It's a town of the living, by design and by necessity. Living in a place where death is effectively exported creates a strange psychological landscape. For the people of Longyearbyen, death becomes something that happens elsewhere, to other people, in other places. But that doesn't mean death doesn't visit Svalbard. In fact, the archipelago is one of the most dangerous places to live in the developed world, though not for reasons you might expect. Polar bears are a constant threat. These apex predators outnumber human residents in Svalbard, and encounters can be deadly. By law, anyone traveling outside the settlement must carry a rifle for protection. Warning signs around town remind residents of the danger. School children are trained in polar bear safety protocols. People have died here from polar bear attacks, though thankfully such incidents are rare due to strict safety measures. The Arctic environment itself poses constant dangers. Avalanches, extreme cold, and the disorienting darkness of polar night create hazardous conditions. In 2015 and 2017, avalanches struck residential areas of Longyearbyen, killing 2 people and destroying several homes. The town has since implemented extensive avalanche protection measures. Industrial accidents in the coal mines have historically claimed lives. In 1920, an explosion in Mine 1 killed 26 miners. Mining, while reduced today, remains a dangerous occupation. So death does occur in Longyearbyen. It's just managed differently than anywhere else. The absence of a functioning cemetery and the policy of sending away the terminally ill creates a unique cultural relationship with mortality. There's no local graveyard to visit lost loved ones. No grave to tend, no marker to lay flowers upon. Death becomes abstract, distant, removed from daily life in a way that's uncommon in most communities. Some residents find this liberating. Life in Longyearbyen is focused intensely on the present, on survival, on the adventure of living in one of Earth's most extreme environments. There's a pioneering spirit here, a sense that everyone who chooses to live at the top of the world is seeking something unusual. Others find the policy unsettling. There's something fundamentally human about wanting to be laid to rest in the place you called home, surrounded by the community you built your life within. The knowledge that you cannot remain, that you must be sent away, creates an underlying impermanence to life in Longyearbyen. Longyearbyen's death ban raises fascinating questions about humanity's relationship with mortality, burial, and the places we call home. Throughout history, burial grounds have been sacred spaces, anchors of community identity. Cemeteries connect us to our past, to our ancestors, to the continuity of human life. They're places of memory, grief, and reflection. To live in a place without that connection is to exist in a kind of eternal present, disconnected from the weight of history that graves represent. But Longyearbyen's policy also represents something very modern, a pragmatic, scientific approach to death that prioritizes public health over tradition. It's a recognition that in extreme environments with unique challenges, old customs may not be feasible or safe. And as climate change accelerates, Longyearbyen's concerns about thawing permafrost and released pathogens may become relevant far beyond this Arctic outpost. There are billions of tons of organic matter, including potentially countless deceased animals and even ancient human remains, locked in permafrost across the Arctic. As this frozen layer thaws, scientists worry about what might be released. In 2016, researchers in Alaska discovered ancient viruses in permafrost samples that had been frozen for 30,000 years. While these particular viruses only infected plants, the discovery proved that ancient pathogens can indeed survive for millennia in frozen conditions. Longyearbyen's death ban, born from a very specific local concern, may actually be a glimpse into challenges humanity will face more broadly in the coming decades. How do we deal with the remains of the past as the planet warms? What happens when frozen history begins to thaw? Over the years, the story of the town where dying is illegal has been sensationalized, twisted, and misunderstood. Let's clear up some common misconceptions. Myth 1. If you die in Longyearbyen, you've broken the law. False. Death itself is not illegal. The regulation concerns burial, not dying. If someone dies in Longyearbyen, no law has been broken. The body is simply transported elsewhere for burial or cremation. Myth 2. Sick people are forcibly deported from Longyearbyen. Not exactly. While it's true that terminally ill people and those requiring extensive medical care cannot remain in Longyearbyen, this isn't enforced through deportation. Rather, the town simply lacks the medical infrastructure to care for such individuals. It's a practical limitation, not a cruel policy. People typically make the decision to relocate to mainland Norway themselves, often with support from their families and employers. Myth 3. The cemetery is full of perfectly preserved bodies that could reanimate like zombies. This is sensationalized fiction, though the truth is eerie enough. Bodies in the cemetery are indeed preserved by permafrost, and some do contain viable genetic material from historical diseases, but there's no risk of reanimation. The concern is purely about pathogen preservation and potential disease release. Myth 4. No one has ever died in Longyearbyen. False. People have died in Longyearbyen from various causes: accidents, polar bear attacks, avalanches, and occasionally from sudden medical emergencies. The difference is what happens after death. Longyearbyen stands as one of humanity's most unusual experiments in remote living. It's a town that exists in defiance of nature, carved out of the Arctic by determination, necessity, and the lure of resources and knowledge. The death ban, really a burial ban, is just one of many ways that life in Longyearbyen is unlike anywhere else on Earth. It's a place where polar bears roam the streets, where the sun refuses to set for months and then refuses to rise, where the ground never thaws and the future of humanity's food supply is locked in a vault beneath a mountain. And it's a place that forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about mortality, climate change, and the limits of human habitation. As we push into more extreme environments, the Arctic, the Antarctic, eventually perhaps other planets, we'll need to grapple with these questions more and more. What do we do with our dead when traditional burial isn't possible? How do we create sustainable communities in places that are fundamentally hostile to human life? What happens when the frozen past begins to thaw and history, including its diseases, comes back to haunt us? Longyearbyen doesn't have all the answers, but it's asking the right questions. The next time someone tells you about the town where no one dies, you'll know the truth. It's not about defeating death or achieving immortality. It's about something much more human: trying to live safely and sustainably in an environment that wasn't meant for us, while respecting the power of nature and the dangers that lie frozen just beneath our feet. Longyearbyen reminds us that death is inevitable, but where and how we deal with it is shaped by environment, science, culture, and the challenges of our changing world. In the place where no one dies, death is perhaps more present than anywhere else, not in graves or memorials, but in the constant awareness that this is a place for the living, and only the living. Thanks for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as we did, make sure to subscribe for more incredible stories from the edges of human civilization. And let us know in the comments, would you want to live in a place like Longyearbyen, knowing you could never truly call it your final home? Until next time, stay curious.